When she was about 68 years old, Brave Orchid took a day off to wait at San Francisco International Airport for the plane that was bringing her sister to the United States. She had not seen Moon Orchid for 30 years. She had begun this waiting at home, getting up a half hour before Moon Orchid's plane took off in Hong Kong. Brave Orchid would add her willpower to the forces that keep an airplane up. Her head hurt with the concentration. The plane had to be light, so no matter how tired she felt, she dared not rest her spirit on a wing, but continuously and gently pushed up on the plane's belly. She had already been waiting at the airport for 9 hours. She was wakeful. Next to Brave Orchid sat Moon Orchid's only daughter, who was helping her aunt wait. Brave Orchid had made 2 of her own children come too because they could drive, but they had been lured away by the magazine racks and the gift shops and coffee shops. Her American children could not sit for very long. They did not understand sitting. They had a wandering feet. She hoped they would get back from the pay TVs or the pay toilets or wherever they were spending their money before the plane arrived. If they did not come back soon, she would go look for them. If her son thought he could hide in the men's room, he was wrong. "Are you all right, Auntie?" asked her niece. "No, this chair hurts me. Help me pull some chairs together so I can put my feet up." She unbundled a blanket and spread it out to make a bed for herself. On the floor, she had 2 shopping bags full of canned peaches, real peaches, beans wrapped in taro leaves, cookies, thermos bottles, enough food for everybody, though her only niece would eat with her. Her bad boy and bad girl were probably sneaking hamburgers, wasting their money. She would scold them. Many soldiers and sailors sat about, oddly calm, like little boys in cowboy uniforms. She thought cowboy was what you'd call a Boy Scout. They should have been crying hysterically on their way to Vietnam. "If I see one of that looks Chinese," she thought, "I'll go over and give him some advice." She sat up suddenly. She had forgotten about her own son, who was even now in Vietnam. Carefully, she split her attention, beaming half of it to the ocean, into the water to keep him afloat. He was on a ship. He was in Vietnamese waters. She was sure of it. He and the other children were lying to her. They had said he was in Japan, and then they had said he was in the Philippines. But when she sent him her help, she could feel that he was on a ship in Da Nang. Also, she had seen the children hide the envelopes that his letters came in. "Do you think my son is in Vietnam?" she asked her niece, who was dutifully eating. "No. Didn't your children say he was in the Philippines? Have you ever seen any of his letters with Philippine stamps on them?" "Oh yes, your children showed me one." "I wouldn't put it past them to send the letters to some Filipino they know. He puts Manila postmarks on them to fool me." "Yes, I can imagine them doing that. But don't worry, your son can take care of himself. All your children can take care of themselves." "Not him. He's not like other people. Not normal at all. He sticks erasers in his ears, and the erasers are still attached to the pencil stubs. The captain will say, 'Abandon ship,' or Watch out for bombs, and he won't hear. He doesn't listen to orders. I told him to flee to Canada, but he wouldn't go." She closed her eyes. After a short while, plane and ship under control, she looked again at the children in uniforms. Some of the blonde ones looked like baby chicks. Their crew cuts like the downy yellow on baby chicks. You had to feel sorry for them, even though they were Army and Navy ghosts. Suddenly, her son and daughter came running. "Come, mother, the plane's landed early. She's here already." They hurried, folding up their mother's encampment. She was glad her children were not useless. They must have known what this trip to San Francisco was about then. "It is a good thing I made you come early," she said. Brave Orchid pushed to the front of the crowd. She had to be in front. The passengers were separated from the people waiting for them by glass doors and walls. Immigration ghosts were stamping papers. The travelers crowded along some conveyor belts to have their luggage searched. Brave Orchid did not see her sister anywhere. She stood watching for 4 hours. Her children left and came back. "Why don't you sit down?" they asked. "The chairs are too far away," she said. "Why don't you sit on the floor then?" No, she would stand, as her sister was probably standing in a line she could not see from here. Her American children had no feelings and no memory. To while away time, she and her niece talked about the Chinese passengers. These new immigrants had it easy. On Ellis Island, the people were thin after 40 days at sea and had no fancy luggage. "That one looks like her," Brave Orchid would say. "No, it's not her." Ellis Island had been made out of wood and iron. Here, everything was new plastic, a ghost trick to lure immigrants into feeling safe and spilling their secrets. Then the alien office could send them right back. Otherwise, why did they lock her out, not letting her help her sister answer questions and spell her name? At Ellis Island, when the ghost asked Brave Orchid what year her husband had cut off his pigtail, a Chinese who was crouching on the floor mentioned her not to talk. "I don't know," she had said. If it weren't for that Chinese man, she might not be here today, or her husband either. She hoped some Chinese man, a janitor or clerk, would look out for Moon Orchid. Luggage conveyors fooled immigrants into thinking the Gold Mountain was going to be easy. Brave Orchid felt her heart jump. "Moon Orchid, there she is!" she shouted, but her niece saw it was not her mother at all, and it shocked her to discover the woman her aunt was pointing out. This was a young woman, younger than herself, no older than Moon Orchid. The day the sisters parted, Moon Orchid will have changed a little, of course. Brave Orchid was saying she'll have learned to wear Western clothes. The woman wore a navy blue suit with a bunch of dark cherries at the shoulder. "No, Auntie," said the niece. "That's not my mother." "Perhaps not. It's been so many years. Yes, it's not your mother. It must be. Let her come closer, and we can tell." "Do you think she's too far away for me to tell? Or is it my eyes getting bad?" "It's too many years gone by," said the niece. Brave Orchid turned suddenly. Another Moon Orchid. This one, a neat little woman with a bun. She was laughing at something the person ahead of her in line said. Moon Orchid was just like that, laughing at nothing. "I would be able to tell the difference if one of them would only come closer," Brave Orchid said, with tears which she did not wipe. Two children met the woman with the cherries, and she shook their hands. The other woman was met by a young man. They looked at each other gladly, then walked away side by side. Up close, neither one of these women looked like Moon Orchid at all. "Don't worry, Auntie," said the niece. "I'll know her." "I'll know her too. I knew her before you did." The niece said nothing, although she had seen her mother only 5 years ago. Her aunt liked having the last word. Finally, Brave Orchid's children quit wondering and drooped on a railing. Who knew what they were thinking? At last, the niece called out, "I see her! I see her! Mother! Mother!" Whenever the doors battered, she shouted, probably embarrassing the American cousins, but she didn't care. She called out, "Mama! Mama!" until the crack in the sliding doors became too small to let in her voice. "Mama!" What a strange word in an adult voice. Many people turned to see what adult was calling "Mama" like a child. Brave Orchid saw an old woman jerk her head up, her little eyes blinking confusedly. A woman whose nerves leapt toward the sound anytime she heard "Mama." Then she relaxed to her own business again. She was tiny lady, very thin with little fluttering hands, and her hair was in a grey knot. She was dressed in a grey wool suit. She wore pearls around her neck and in her earlobes. Moon Orchid would travel with her jewels showing. Brave Orchid momentarily saw like a larger, younger outline around this old woman, the sister she had been waiting for. The familiar dim halo faded, leaving the woman so old, so grey, so old. Brave Orchid pressed against the glass. That old lady? Yes, that old lady facing the ghost who stamped her papers without questioning her was her sister. Then, without noticing her family, Moon Orchid walked smiling over to the suitcase inspector ghost, who took her boxes apart, pulling out puffs of tissue. From where she was, Brave Orchid could not see what her sister had chosen to carry across the ocean. She wished her sister would look her way. Brave Orchid thought that if she were entering a new country, she would be at the windows. Instead, Moon Orchid hovered over the unwrapping, surprised at each reappearance, as if she were opening presents after a birthday party. "Mama!" Moon Orchid's daughter kept calling. Brave Orchid said to her children, "Why don't you call your auntie too? Maybe she will hear us if all of you call out together." But her children slunk away. Maybe that shame face they so often wore was American politeness. "Mama!" Moon Orchid's daughter called, and this time her mother looked right at her. She left her bundles in a heap and came running. "Hey!" the customs ghost yelled at her. She went back to clear up her mess, talking inaudibly to her daughter all the while. Her daughter pointed toward Brave Orchid. At last, Moon Orchid looked at her. Two old women, with faces like mirrors. Their hands reached out as if to touch the other's face, then returned to their own, the fingers checking the grooves in the forehead and along the sides of the mouth. Moon Orchid, who never understood the gravity of things, started smiling and laughing, pointing at Brave Orchid. Finally, Moon Orchid gathered up her stuff, strings hanging and papers loose, and met her sister at the door, where they shook hands, oblivious to blocking the way. "You are an old woman," said Brave Orchid. "Ah, You are an old woman. But you're really old. Surely you can't say that about me. I'm not old the way you're old. But you really are old. You are 1 year older than I am. Your hair is white and your face all wrinkled. You're so skinny. You're so fat. Fat women are more beautiful than skinny women. The children pulled them out of the doorway. One of Brave Orchid's children brought the car from the parking lot, and the other heaved the luggage into the truck. They put the 2 old ladies and the niece in the back seat all the way home, across the Bay Bridge, over the Diablo Hills, across the San Joaquin River, to the valley moon so white at dusk, all the way home. The 2 sisters exclaimed every time they turned to look at each other, "Ah, how old!" Brave Orchid forgot that she got sick in cars, that all vehicles but palanquins made her dizzy. "You're so old," she kept saying. "How did you get so old?" Brave Orchid had tears in her eyes, but Moon Orchid said, "You look older than I. You are older than I." And again she would laugh. "You're wearing an old mask to tease me." It surprised Brave Orchid that after 30 years she could still get annoyed at her sister's silliness. Extract from The Woman Warrior by Maxine Hong Kingston.